Welcome to Filmi Ladies. We have an exceptionally exciting episode today because we have something in line for Christmas and for Pitu's upcoming birthday, which is cakes.
Yay!
Cakes of Bollywood, cakes of Indian cinema, other kinds of treats and feasts and all sorts of good stuff. And our special guest is Aditi Sen, who probably most of you know from various projects over the years. She knows an absolute ton about the history of everything that's interesting, including religion and sexuality, and also gender and food and comics and horror and just like everything that's amazing. And we're so excited she could be on this episode. Aditi, thank you so much for coming on to our special Christmas party episode.
I'm so happy. Thank you, Beth.
Aditi is another person that I have known forever and ever and ever through social media. And we've had so many great conversations over the years. And I knew that this would be a fun one. So Aditi, if you don't already know her, among her many interests is the Cakes of Bollywood. She runs a Tumblr and an Instagram, both devoted to this topic, which you may think is niche, but is not at all. Cakes are everywhere in everything. And they, the more I look at your collections, the more I realize that cakes have to say. So I wanted to start with cakes. Are cakes the number one like treat food? And if they're not, what are some of the other contenders for like representation of a special treat?
That's a good one because I would often think initially. Remember, I think we talked about it also once. How kheer is one of the things, rice pudding, and then halwa. Those were there, but initially always think cake becomes this more Western elite sort of thing. And then it starts, you find eventually moving into, like, you have older films where the rich girl would have cake in their birthdays. Like you have the black and white where it's always somebody rich with a cake.
Mm.
There's the so I think, and eventually in 90s and 80s, then you have much more presence of cakes in
Would you say that cake is now a fairly democratically used item in at least in films?
definitely.
Okay.
And the cakes have gotten better. The cakes have gotten more specialized. Like some of the new ones, there was that movie, I think, Chandigarh Kare Ashiki, where he had a kettlebell cake. Now it's getting special also. So,
So not
yeah.
only does the basic form has spread, the specialization of the form has spread.
Yeah.
What are some of the other foods you think of when you think of scenes that are about a special occasion or a special gathering or even like just a special treat in films? What else comes to mind for you?
For me, it's cake because I've been hunting for it all the time. And that's I'm fixated and looking. If there's other food, I'm probably not noticing. I'm just There are horrible films I've sat through hoping they'll have a birthday scene because they've teased with a birthday scene and I'm waiting, and then they'll have a cake or something. But really, there are tons of, I'm sure there are tons of things that people see, especially I think VAT 69 was that go-to special whiskey for rich people. And I have a cake with both VAT 69 and I have two cakes with that. But that's exactly how it goes.
One of those is one of the ones I picked out of my
Yeah.
list of the favorites on your blog. Pitu, what about you? What are like special occasion and treat foods that you notice in films?
I think when they want to show like a middle class or a lower middle class family, it's always maa ke haath ki bani hui kheer, which used to make my mother irrationally angry when I was growing up. Like anytime there's a scene where someone is like, मैंने खीर अपने हाथ से बनाई है. For some reason, my mother always has to retort. She's like, well, of course she would make it with her hands. Would she make it with her feet? And I'm like, what is this bizarre anger you have for moms making kheer? But it was always like some Nirupa Roy type mom, like, some nice bichari mom, and she was always making kheer. And then there was halwa. And I love that song from that Mithunda movie where, that song like, aa gaya, halwa wala aa gaya. I don't even like halwa, but I like the song. So I think I agree with Aditi that it's basically cake and champagne, I would say, signifies celebrations in Hindi cinema, because you have stuff like samosas and stuff, but that's like very normal treat. There's like, oh, the neighbor is coming, so with tea we're going to serve them samosas and snacks. Like, that's not fancy enough. And then there's scenes where people have like ice cream, like in a lot of Yash Chopra
Ice
movies,
cream,
they'll have
yeah.
like ice cream and
Right.
shimla, but that's not really celebratory either. So I associate cakes, like Aditi said, and then at some point, I think especially with Feroz Khan, champagne became a thing, and now I always like notice champagne in his films where they have like a little chutku glass of champagne, and I'm like, yes, please.
He would bring that.
He would.
Our patron saint of this podcast.
Yeah.
So what are the things that stands out for me food wise in terms of like maybe someone wants to cheer themselves up, or maybe they're, I don't know, showing someone around their city or something? I feel like pani puri comes up a lot. Am I right about that? Or do I just notice it because it's sort of
It
as an American, it's not something that I encounter every day.
It does, but it's not. It's like a very simple treat because pani puri
Mhm.
costs nothing. I mean,
Right.
absolutely nothing. So it's kind of like, oh, you're eating pani puri or batata vada or something. It's not a celebration, and it's not like a
Mm.
thing. So yeah, I don't. And also when they want to show like someone indulging, like that amazing scene from Dil Dhadakne Do that you and I love, where Shafali Shah is so like upset and unhappy, and at night when she's eating chocolate cake, like that scene would not have the impact it does if she was just digging into like pulao. Like, pulao doesn't feel indulgent. Like, I love pulao, but it doesn't feel indulgent in the way that cake does. Or even in a recent movie, in Rocky or Rani Ki Prem Kahani, the mom at the middle of the night was like eating cake, and then her daughter comes, and then Alia joins them and everything. Again, that scene wouldn't be as much fun if they were just like digging into, I don't know, a paratha. It just feels so much more okay. Like, no, I want like a dark chocolate ganache cake, like something that you can really like dig into. So I think cake really is like the
Cake is it?
epitome of like luxury. And then if you want it to be a beverage, then it's champagne.
I
Or
feel
VAT 69. I mean,
yeah.
VAT 69.
Yeah.
It's just for villains, that was the best. Feroz could pull anything, right? Feroz Khan looks good. Like, even if he had a glass of water, it would be
Yes.
good. But
So suave. Feroz
yeah,
Khan
It's
could
true.
probably get like a nariyal, and he could like put a straw in it and drink
exactly.
coconut water, and he would still be sophisticated.
Exactly.
Why is there no Feroz Khan film with a cowboy hat cake? Or maybe there is and
Ah,
I haven't seen it yet.
Maybe there is. We
or a
haven't
cowboy
found it.
boot.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
There is.
So I'm glad Pitu brought up the Dilda Daknedo scene, because for me, that's going to be one of the top cake scenes in a movie. But before we get to naming some of those, Aditi, how do you feel like cakes are used narratively in a film? Like either plot wise or emotion wise or character development wise, like what do cakes offer the viewer in a film?
So much though, right? Like Dil Dhadakne Do, obviously, and Rocky Rani, right? They have both got that whole night secret eating depression. That's very modern.
Hmm.
Earlier, you would have, well, my favorite cake all time is Intikam, where they have the cake for her as a murder device. They've hidden something, and the moment she's going to cut the cake, it's going to kill her. They've just planted the cake with something. That's like my favorite. But, and then my second favorite is Dial 100's cake with the dead body. That's symbolic. It's just a cake that's a dead, like, why you would bring a wedding anniversary cake in a stretcher that's a dead body, and then it's Ranjit bringing. So that is one of my all-time
Oh
favorite,
yeah.
because they're so morbid, and yet there is like celebratory morbid. This will be a last cake. Also, so many cakes though. Like, I do call them cakes of doom, because they often happen when someone's dying. Like, there'll be a bad news. You see cake, and they're about to cut the cake, and police walks in, arrests somebody, or someone's dead. Like, it's, and the cake gets left there because that somebody's dead and something horrible's happened. So
I'm such a terrible human being that if that happened, like if I was a real life person in a scene, and like, if Tikar or one of our favorite cops is walking into
yeah,
it, or Parikshit Sahni or something, and there's like a murder that's happened and there's all this investigation, I would legit be that person in a corner, just like surreptitiously eating cake. Because like, I don't want that to go to waste. I mean, the dead person is dead anyway, just eat your cake. So
I saw on Aditi's, I think it was on Instagram, Aditi, but you had posted a cake from Prim Geet. And you said, your caption says, trust Raj Babar to ruin everything by placing a dead body next to a cake, which is the best caption ever. And then one of your readers wrote, cake is still cake though. And I was like, that's how you know you reached the best possible audience for your content. I was like, yes, cake is still cake
Right.
though.
Yeah, he decides that. And then there is that map cake, which Beth would remember. India, it's like they cut, the Pakistani guy cuts Kashmir out and eats it. Very symbolic, this from Qayamat, the map cake. So there are a lot of plot devices that happens through cake. Or
So
the one where I think it's Sazish, where Sarah Banu is jumping off the cake out of a cake, or Amitabh Bachchan in Mard jumping out of Govinda in one. So that
oh
happens.
yeah.
Cake is carriers of something, like people
I
jump.
love one of the things that just occurred to me today while looking at all this stuff is that cake is maybe the top, or certainly one of the top social foods. And which is why those scenes of secret eating at night work so well, because you're not supposed to eat cake by yourself. I think,
Yeah.
right? Like maybe you can eat a cupcake by yourself, but like that doesn't have the impact of a cake. And so the idea of like eating cake secretly from the fridge when other people are asleep or whatever, that's why that works. And like having, just taking a sandwich or something or whatever, or a spoonful of whatever doesn't have the same impact, because cake is for sharing, I think. And cake is for sharing. And because it's for sharing, then there's obviously the idea of witnesses or an audience or whatever. So cake is this like social platform that involves people coming together and doing things together. And then there's the performativeness of cake, like and especially something I noticed when I first started watching Indian films, because I didn't know about this, is like feeding another person a piece of cake is a big deal, right? Or at least it's a thing that you show that you're doing. And obviously the fact that a cake usually comes with a knife and you have to cut it in front of people is also very good for symbolic use, like partitioning a country.
Yeah. Or Ranjit using it as a murder device. I forget which film. He delivers the cake, murders the woman, keeps the cake, leaves.
Cake is still cake,
That's
though.
cold.
I love that. Are there other foods that kind of work in some of those same way? Like obviously in US and films, you're going to get a pie kind of covering some of that same thing, but cake is still better because you can decorate a cake in so many ways that I think people don't tend to do pies. But like, are there any other foods in Indian films that serve a lot of these same functions, do you think?
Kheer. I think
Right.
Kheer does.
Yeah.
Like, what was the Chacha Bhatija where he really remembers the taste of his aunt, with his bhabhi's kheer, and then he remembers and he's getting this own memory. I think kheer is a big, big
Yeah.
point.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Are cakes or cake scenes gendered particularly, do you think?
Not really.
Yeah,
Like,
I don't think so either. And like you were talking about with Cure, there's the dialogues about mom making it or whatever. I've never noticed that with cakes. I've never heard any discussion of who labored to make the cake other than in Josh.
Right.
But like pretty much the cake just appears and it might be personalized, but there's no like drama over who made it really, which is kind of interesting.
or Judai. Judai is
Ooh.
there's the whole cake debate. Like there's the expensive cake that Urmila, the Sridevi has, and then there's a cheaper cake that Farida Jalal brings in. There's a bit in there happening in Judai, but as such, no. Like really, very small tray. But here is like always the mother is Pitu was just adding there.
Yeah, like I think as a viewer of Hindi cinema, I would be very perplexed if there was a scene where, the hero's girlfriend brings him kheer, because I'd be like, what? Why are you bringing him kheer? Like that's what the
Oh, it's a
mom does. Like it
mom
would
food.
be, yeah, it's like such a strange thing. Like you shouldn't be bringing the hero kheer though. But when you were saying the thing about the gendered, I feel like, and I could be wrong, but I feel like every scene I've seen in Hindi cinema where it's like a big birthday party and they're cutting the cake and they're blowing out the candles, isn't it always the heroine though? Like
Ooh.
when is the hero? Like I don't remember Shah Rukh or
No, Shah
Saif
Rukh has
or
heroes
wait,
have
he's cutting the cake like it's his birthday.
he has that cake that actually Beth sent me, that cake from 1 2 4 where he's holding.
Ah.
Like heroes have cake. There's that bhai bhai where there are two people sharing these two brothers having a cake thing.
Mm.
Quite a bit. I have a fairly large collection of male also cutting the cake.
Interesting. I guess for me, when I think of like those birthday party scenes with cake, I always think for some reason of the 60s heroines. Like it was always Saira Banu, Mumtaz, Sadhna, because they always played like the rich, like millionaire's daughter. They would always, there was the standard template. Like they always wore like a chiffon or a georgette sari with lots of sequins on it. Their hair would be in a beehive. They would have the cat eyeliner, and they would wear lots of like glitzy, like crystal jewelry, and then it would be a whole thing, and then they would cut the cake, and there would be a lot of glamour, and then there would be people dancing, and somebody like absolutely pounding the piano in the background like some hero. So like to me, that's like that big like heroine ki entry wala scene. And one of my favorite scenes actually is from the movie Divana, where it's Divya Bharti's birthday, and she's wearing this candy pink sari, looks like an absolute doll, and she has this cake, and her mother-in-law is there, and then Shah Rukh is over there, and then someone starts playing the guitar or something, and you're like, oh no, oh my god, it's Rishi Kapoor back from the dead. That is like such a great scene too, because it's like she's going to cut it, and it's like, oh no, she does cut it, and she blows out the candles, and then it's Rishi back in his sweater.
Who is the king? Who are the king and queen of cakes in your research so far, Aditi?
Shah Rukh and Juhi. Juhi has lots of
Nice.
cakes in her films, and so does Shah Rukh. Shah Rukh, almost all his films have a cake in fact.
Wow.
Shah Rukh and Juhi.
I knew you were going to say Shah Rukh, because that's my experience as well, and I think we've actually talked about that, but I didn't know who the woman lead would be. But I love that it's Juhi, and that kind of fits
Me
my
too.
image of her as like kind of fun and in not as much as Sri Devi, but she certainly wears her share of like confectionery frocks and things like
Yeah.
that. So she kind of looks like a cake in a good way.
I love Juhi. One of my favorites. She's just delightful. Like, yeah, like she matches being the queen of cake. She really fits it. Yeah.
Does that mean that the 90s and early 2000s then are peak cake era? Okay.
I see a lot of 80s, 90s. I see a lot of cake. My favorite cakes are from 90s, honestly, the ones I
Interesting.
really like a standard birthday basic cake would be the pineapple, so unique to South Asia, the pineapple cake, which I still quite enjoy. I have not seen the pineapple cake much anywhere else. It's a very
Oh.
South Asian thing, I think.
What
Like
what
the
it talk
pineapple-
what is it? Tell me. I don't even know this cake, I don't think.
It's just a vanilla cake with lots of cream, but decorated with pineapple on top.
Yum.
So it's a nice cake, but that used to be the best seller. Like that's the cake we all got for birthdays.
Nice.
And then later on we had a bit of chocolate. I do pay attention to a lot of those things. And then we got a butterscotch.
Ooh.
Growing up, 80s and 90s, 80s, especially 80s, there was not a lot of, at least in Calcutta, you had a very proper distinction. So if there were richer people, they would go to Flurries for it. Like Flurries was where people went, the rich people. So I think my parents went there maybe once in 5 years. But the middle class would have things like Kathleen, and then there was another one called Jollo Jog, which was like the cheapest, and they had hard sugar frosting. So it wasn't such a big thing in Calcutta growing up. It was like people would get cake for a birthday, but there was a very strong like distinctions, and chocolate, like more sophisticated. We never had dark chocolate. There would be like three kinds of cakes really: chocolate, pineapple, which is actually vanilla with decorated pineapple, and butterscotch.
Which all sound delicious to me, I have to say. Pitu, was cake a big part of your childhood growing up in Africa?
Yeah. Cake was a big deal, and my mom would buy cookbooks, like baking books from London every year, because you didn't get baking books in Nigeria. And she was incredibly creative. So like she would bake like these like castles for my birthday cake, and she would she was so inventive. I remember one year she was like, I said to her, because I was such a brat, I was like, well, if it's a castle, it has to have turrets. And then she was like, how do I make turrets? Because like she didn't have that kind of like architectural ability, right? So the woman literally went to like a Baskin Robbins, and she just ordered, like she just bought like 12 cones, like just the cones, nothing in them. And the people were like, why are you buying just cones, ma'am? And she was like, just sell me the cones. And she made those into turrets and then, you know, decorated them. So cake was very important growing up. No birthday party was complete without cake, and like
Yeah.
the grander and the more exorbitant the better. And we had a lot of bakeries growing up, so I'd say this is going to sound very unpopular, but when I would come to India, I hated the cakes. I don't like any of the cakes that Aditi mentioned, because to me they were too sweet. They were too sweet and
Ah.
there wasn't enough flavor. Whereas I grew up eating like the chocolate ganache cakes and the angel food cakes and stuff like that. So I would come to India and then there would be like three options, and I'm like, yeah, I don't want this. Um, so I don't really like Indian cakes,
No, I
but
totally agree with
like,
you. I totally agree. It wasn't very
yeah.
good. Until I left India, I realized, oh my God, those were not very good. Having said
Yeah.
that, I think it's gotten much, much, much better now with all that.
Okay.
That is also because people didn't have ovens ready to bake at home.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, that makes so much
There's a
sense.
whole technological
Yeah,
gap and everything wasn't in there. People didn't have oven. Baking was not a part of culture. People only
right.
very specialized things. So,
That
and you're
makes so much
absolutely
sense.
right. There was not an understanding, which is why
Yeah.
the
But
rich people had kids.
it's such an unpopular opinion. Like I have to keep my mouth shut because, like, you know, other Indian people will be like, "Oh, do you remember Monjini's?" And I was like, "Yeah, it kind of sucked." But I can't say that because, like, you can't diss Monjini's. Like Indian people will like beat you up if you say things like that. So you can't. You can't criticize Kasata. You can't criticize Black Forest. You just have to like smile and say, "Hmm, so nice."
Black
But you
forest
know, I
is national flavor, right? Like it's
what
everywhere.
was
I
that?
find it here a lot. Black forest is a flavor you have everywhere,
Yeah,
right? I
yeah.
Yeah.
find it here all the time. So yeah.
But
Uh,
you know, one interesting thing that I noticed, I don't know what it was like in other parts of the country, but I know that in Mumbai and in the South, there was a huge generational divide where it came to like birthday cakes. Because
mm,
I know that my grandparents, especially, were not a big fan of the idea. Because, first of all, cakes typically contained egg, and like in my family, everyone's
mm,
vegetarian, no one eats egg. So my grandparents would be like, okay, why do these things contain egg? Which is
mhm.
why in Mumbai, especially, eggless cakes were super, super common because there were entire communities in Mumbai who would not eat a cake if it contained even a hint of egg, or if they were even made in a bakery that had like egg containing egg, you know, like Iyengar
Wow.
bakery and stuff. It would be like there was no egg. The other thing which is so interesting, I once asked my grandmother, I was like, what is this, like, why don't you like birthday cakes and stuff? And she made such an interesting point that never even occurred to me. She said in Indian culture, at least among Hindus, the way you celebrate a birthday is that, you know, you do the aarti of the person whose birthday it is, and then, you know, you put like tilak on them, and then you feed them something sweet. It's usually like mithai, like a laddu or something like that. And the main thing is the fire that's in the aarti, that is not to go out, because that represents like life and things like that. So to my grandmother, the idea that on a birthday cake you have candles, which is fire, and you blow them out was insane. She was like, why would you blow out a candle on your birthday? You're
Fascinating.
supposed to have an like a flame that keeps burning. And
Mm,
when I heard that for the first time, I was like, what? So there's also like a generational divide where, I mean, I know that my parents were like big fans of like birthday cakes and things like that, but the generation before that was very suspicious. They did not like the idea of birthday cakes. They did not like the idea of candles being
Mhm.
lit and extinguished. It was a whole thing. And I find it very interesting that I've never seen a Hindi movie or an Indian film that sort of addresses that. If you notice, at these birthday parties, there's never any old people. There's never granny and grandpa, like they're Om Shiv Puri. They're not like hanging around. They're not feeding you cake because, like in most Indian families, they did not approve.
that's fascinating.
Isn't it?
I would never have thought about that. And that is, and the thing about the eggless bakery, like, yeah, once you say it, I'm like, oh, that makes total sense.
Yeah.
So interesting. Have either of you ever seen, um, let me back up. So one of the things I love about cakes in real life and in films is the canvas that they provide for elaboration of some kind. I actually had as my Zoom backdrop here for a minute the train cake that you have, Aditi, where it's like multiple cars of a train that have been almost look like a little kid did it. Like they're
Oh
cute
yeah.
as can be. And obviously the cakes, I've seen some amazing decoration in the cakes in your collection. So could you talk a little bit about any decorative themes you see? And have you seen any films where someone has combined a sort of sheet or even a layer cake and really applied Indian artistic traditions to it? Like, are there rangoli cakes? Are there mendi cakes?
Hmm.
I
So
don't think I've ever seen any, but you have seen a lot
no,
more than I have.
no, the Akela cake, that train cake from Akela is is a great cake actually. Because I mean, I'm sure it was done by somebody at home, like some home baker quickly putting something. And it's a fun little cake. But the context of the cake is it's not rich people. So it's people who live in the chawl and they've come together to make this cake. So that
Oh,
also conveys very
that's so
beautifully.
sweet. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a kind of that way, it's very nice. But to me, one of the very Indian cakes that I can think is from a strange movie called Arjun Pandit, where it's written in Hindi. So that's quite rare. That I thought was it's meant for Juhi, yet she doesn't even. But that cake, it's written in Hindi.
Oh, yeah. You don't see that much, do you? It's
You don't
almost always
see
in
Yeah.
English.
You don't see that. That's where I
Uh,
remember. I thought that had a bit of an Indian touch. Well,
yeah.
we can also call our one of our favorite cakes from April Fool as a very thematic, April Fool, where you have the Chinese soldier's head and Saira Ban who cuts through it. That one is
That
just
is intense. That
okay.
is an intensely jingoistic,
Yeah.
xenophobic, and
Yes.
sculptural cake.
Yes. It's a bizarre cake, and yeah. So there are like that. That's what you find, these very interesting cakes. And I'm now forgetting the name of the film, but there is I forget the name of the actress too, but it's Rishi Kapoor is in the film, and the name will come to me eventually. But her cake is very, it's a birthday cake, it's chocolate, but it's just a bizarre castle kind of a cake. But she's got like, but it's a very shoddy kind of a castle cake. It's not sophisticated. It's got little things pumped in. It's just like somebody went and designed something, and it's got a whole garden, and it's got all these themes in it. And I find it a very Indian kind of a theme because, you know. And again, talking of themes a little bit, there is Sindoor, where Shashi Kapoor and Jaya Prada have a dispute. And I think the cake is placed very strategically. It's a house. It's one of those
Mm,
chocolate house, and they're cutting it from the middle, and Rishi Kapoor is in the middle, and he's caused the dispute. It's framed very well. I like the whole framing of that cake. It's like their marital dispute, and he has caused it. And so the cake is being cut, and then he's right in the middle watching them cut the cake.
that is
Which-
so pleasingly symbolic.
exactly. So it's
In looking through
used in
your
very interesting ways.
collection, so I saw one. I've seen this film, but I don't remember it. And Pitu will love this because it stars Sunny Paji.
Yay.
Ag Kagola.
You found that cake for me.
Did I?
Yes.
There's a cake with a cannon on it.
Yeah.
Oh.
A cannon. Like that is intense. There are, I mean, so I feel like you get a lot of, obviously just like the sort of scallops around the edge, some flowers. Occasionally you get like, it almost looks like little fences, like little swags
Mhm.
of a railing or something like that. A lot of maraschino cherries, which I fully approve of. I love a maraschino cherry. You get, I'm trying to think what else. Candles, obviously, very, very standard. What else are things that appear on cakes a whole lot? Like types of decorations I'm looking, some sprinkles, not a ton of sprinkles. That doesn't seem to be as much a thing, but there's obviously these elaborate things with frosting. You have one with, it's a corporate cake where someone's cutting a corporate logo of Micron. I forget what film that is, but you can imagine that happening in a lot of the movies where it's like the hero and his friends work in some sort of faceless office and they hate it. You can imagine something like that. Oh, here's the kettlebell cake. Yeah, just so many astounding cakes and the layers and the frou-frou and everything like that are just, I mean, and I don't think that's unique to India by any means. Obviously, there's cakes a lot of places in the world that look like that. I know your collections are mostly Hindi as far as I have noticed. And I know I've sent you the odd Bengali cake here and there from my watching. Do people send you cakes from other cinemas?
I got one from a I think it was a Kannada film. It's a Kannadiga film where you have a cake that looks like heart, like it's an anatomically correct heart. So it's quite graphic and weird. That's why they
Wow.
sent it. I get some Bengali films, obviously, from you guys, but that was really like, usually I keep strict to Hindi, but that I thought was okay. It's like a heart. It's got everything. Yeah, it's good.
I wonder what the context is. Like, is the birthday
Yeah.
boy or the birthday girl like a student of cardiology, or did they just get a pacemaker? Like, why an anatomically correct heart? I want to know the backstory behind this cake now.
I think there's a like a love angle going on. I forget. There's a person who sent me did tell me the angle, but I think it's a love
Oh,
angle going on, and
okay.
not a cardiologist. That would have made a lot of interesting.
Yeah.
But no, that's not happening. I don't think so. But
One of
that's
my
one good one I have.
one of my favorites is one I've sent you in Ek Ladki Ko Dekha. There's a cake with pictures of Dharmendra, Dev Anand, and Joy Mukherjee on it.
Oh dear.
Those great.
And your caption says, perhaps the only cake ever made featuring Joy Mukherjee, which I suspect is true. If there are more out there, I would like to know about it. You have diamond smuggling cakes.
Oh, I love that one.
Can you tell us more about that
There's
setting?
this high diamond in that, and that's actually, you can see it's one of those cheaper bakery cakes. You buy it from your local bakery. Like we had a for Christmas, the only thing, and my parents still do it, is they will go and buy a cake from the local bakery. It's a plum cake or a fruit cake.
Oh, yeah.
At the local bakery, it's just like a small little place. The bakery near them is called Maruti Bakery, and there's another one. They'll go to either one of them, go, and they'll buy that cake. And these are not even with a sophisticated frosting or anything. They probably have a little bit of frosting on the side.
Mm.
This one, he cuts the middle of the cake out. It's very much a basic sponge, I think. Hides the diamond, stuffs the cake back. It still looks quite shoddy. You can tell something's been done. They try to cover it up with a little bit of frosting, and that's how they're smuggling diamonds. And nobody suspects anything because they're like, yeah.
That also
I mean,
almost feels Agatha Christie-ish, right? That there's
Yeah,
a diamond
yeah.
in a cake. And I know there's a Poirot where there's a ruby that's in a plum pudding
In
or
a
something
pudding.
like that. But yeah,
In a
seems
pudding,
pretty
yeah.
close.
Yeah.
so I know we see a lot of birthday cakes in Hindi movies, but I feel like we don't see a lot of cupcakes, do we?
No, you're right.
Hmm.
I wonder why that is. Because I mean, cupcakes aren't associated with like big celebrations. It's just like, oh, let's get cupcakes for the office party, sort of in the same category as muffins. So maybe they're not as
Mm.
like
They're less
celebratory and
showy.
fun.
90s, I never saw cupcakes.
Mm.
What we saw was what was known as pastries in India, not known as it's a different thing, but those small pastries, and that you will find in a lot of Hindi films where there's a social
Yeah.
occasion, people have come and they're serving them a pastry.
Mm.
Mm-hmm.
Cupcakes were not there when I was now, obviously, but when I was growing up, we didn't get cupcakes at all.
They don't have quite the same feel, I don't think. And growing up for birthdays for me, it was almost always a sheet cake that my mom made, and I still from a mix, I'll be clear. And I love those and I still love them.
I love cake from a mix.
Sometimes there were cupcakes, and like if you had to, the school I grew up in, you brought treats for your own birthday to share. And so sometimes it would be cupcakes, and like I would walk to school carrying cupcakes, which is a dumb idea because it's really easy to tip the pan over and like ruin all the cupcakes. I don't know why my mom or dad thought that was a good idea. But anyway, but yeah, cupcakes just don't, you can do different kinds of like artful displays, but it's much harder to write on them unless you just do
Yeah.
it but they're just kind of less showy. and
Have
therefore
you
less fun
guys
in films.
have you ever seen that meme about that person who went to like some bakery here in the US to get a cake that said congratulations, and the person had written congrats, but then the person was like, no, but I want congratulations. So it's like congratulations. It's so funny. I love that.
I mean,
I
the
have it
Cake
saved.
Rex blog, right, was famous back in the day of all the terrible, terrible cakes.
Yeah, I love that blog.
I'm just kind of
Speaking of
flicking through all
cupcakes,
your.
there is one I remember because Pitu was here and she likes Sunny Deol. There was that weird movie with Sunny Deol and Kangana, and that had cupcakes. Remember they had a film together? It's awful. The film
It's
was
Hero
awful.
something. Hero something, I
it's
think. I
got
don't
New
know.
York in the title, doesn't it?
Something in New York.
Oh
It's
dear.
a love
Okay.
story and something happening in New York, and she gets upset and she starts eating a lot of cupcakes. See, it's a terrible film. I've seen it. I've seen a lot of really bad films because they had some cake in it. And then I'm like, okay, 50 minutes have gone. I've invested that time. I might as well finish it. So
That's
that's
true devotion. I admire your devotion to cakes. You are our people.
One of the cakes that I saw on your blog that I had not noticed before, or your Tumblr, sorry, is it's from John Johnny Janardan, and you call it a cake that is a portal to a parallel universe. And as I look at it, for people, I'll put the link in, but like it's a really nice flat cake, looks to be almost a square, maybe chocolate because it's dark brown. And it's got very almost Mendy-like pattern on it, I would say, with white icing and then a central diamond that says someone's name and then 25 years in the middle. But then like a film clip appears in the central motif of the cake. I am speechless. That is so cool. Can you tell us more about how that works?
memory. He remembers as he looks at the cake. Memory flashback comes 25 years later. It's just he remembers the past, what happened, what wrong was done. I'm told you, cake has been used for some very
Brilliant.
interesting device storytelling. That's a great story.
Yeah.
Example, I forgot about
That
it.
is so cool. And I don't know who that director is, but who's the director that's the monarch of all cakes, would you say? Manmohan Desai. Yes, of course he is. Of course he is. Even though he never worked with Shah Rukh, right? But he's still the king of cakes for directors. Do you think he was actually just a personal fan of cake?
I think so, because remember, I think it's Parvarish where our favorite, where Shami actually makes sure everyone's eating the cake, or the one with Shashi, the Aa Gale Lag Ja.
Yeah.
Make sure everyone eats the cake. I find that really like interesting.
Yeah. That's
Child's
a good
birthday,
point.
every child is eating the cake. We're not wasting the cake. In all his films, Amar Akbar, cakes will get eaten. He doesn't waste it. Yes, cakes in most of it.
I love that. So since we just mentioned my favorite film ever, Pitu, are there any cakes in K3G? And is Keijo a big cake person? I feel like it would go well with his, visual splendor and interest in depicting, sort of rich people, but I can't think of
You
any.
would think so, but I don't associate Keiju with cakes at all. I actually don't even think that he does like those big, like lavish birthday party kind of things. Like anytime there's like a social gathering in a Keiju movie, it's usually like a sagai, it's like an engagement, or it's like a wedding is going to happen. And so there is mehendi and things like that. And so there are sweet treats in his movies, but they're almost invariably sweets that are associated with like wedding functions. Like there's always mithai, right? Like there's always people are feeding each other, force feeding them laddus and jalebis and
And he
mithais and
loves a
stuff because they're
sweet
celebrating.
maker, as we've seen in at
Right,
least 2 of his films. So, but
right.
not cakes.
Not cakes. He just doesn't do like big birthday party things. Do the Barjatias have a lot of cakes in their movies, Aditi? Because I feel like they do a fair bit of birthday parties, right?
Not so much. It's
Not so much. Okay.
surprising that the other movie I can think of is B.R. Chopra's Zamir, where cake is the passage of. So it's all the cakes are in the credits. So they want to show how years have passed, and they how Amitabh Bachchan, like the lost child, which is not Amitabh Bachchan, is growing up, and how they celebrate, they remember his lost child, and it's just cakes in the opening credits.
That
sounds
brilliant.
amazing.
It's an interesting way to show how
Oh
time
my
is passing.
gosh.
But honestly, the Bajatias don't have a lot of like.
I
Not
would have
that we
thought they
have
would
it,
too,
but
actually.
Mohan Desai.
Hmm.
Interesting.
I'm looking at your site and I'm seeing a cake from the film Charandas where there's a model of the dog on the cake, and then you see the dog who also has a party hat and a big bow on, just like the dog
Oh,
on the cake. So cute. So not only
so
humans, but also
precious.
animal friends get cakes. Wow. They really are everything and everywhere. This is a little bit of a detour, but it is cakes. And one of the things that I love looking at in Hindi films, especially those sort of 70s, 80s vintage that I love the most, is those giant houses, giant palatial houses where you have a big, huge central room that'll have a lot of couches in it, some chairs. It looks like a lobby almost, but it's their house. And it's almost like a cake has been flipped inside out because the plaster work and all is so decorative and frilly and everything. And I almost feel like there, in Hindi films anyway, there's houses that become cakes, like showing off this amazing artistry and splendor. And again, a sign of wealth in some way or other.
All the Barjatya houses are like that, actually.
Right.
If you look at the house in Hum Aapke Kaun and everything, they do those double staircases, and
Oh
it's all
yeah.
the plaster, the ornateness. I mean, those, like, for a director who doesn't particularly showcase his sets, certainly look cake-like.
Yeah. Are there are cakes always at home? Like, do cakes show up in someone brought one to the club, someone brought one to work? Like, the ones I can think of are all at someone's house, I feel.
Isn't it in
See,
Kahuna Pyar Hai or something? Like, I know it's Amisha Patel's birthday, and then isn't the cake somewhere else? Like, it's not her home. I think it's like a restaurant or a club or something, and there's that cake and everything. So I think sometimes, especially when they're showing young people, like college goers or something,
Mm,
I think sometimes they show their birthday party being held at like a restaurant or a club, and then the friends come in with the cake, and they're like, and then there's like a hoo-ha, and then of course there has to be a song and a dance number. But I
sure.
think sometimes they do that. But offices, I can't think of a single movie where I've seen like an office cake cutting.
Mm.
office, well, you have colleges. Actually, I want to point out
Oh yeah.
this is so important. You'll have college campus cake kind of thing. That's there. Friends, colleges. But office, no, you're right. Except
Mm,
the Kayamat map cake, which is happening in army, some kind of clandestine. It's hard to find. And that other one that Beth mentioned from Thappar, where it's a corporate cake.
mm.
Not really, not really.
Do villains get cakes or only heroes and heroines?
Villains do. I have from Jaise Ko Taisa. That's one of my favorite, where the villain gets a nice purplish, pretty cake, actually. So some villains do. Some villains
Nice.
very much do. Yes, yes.
Because
And
again,
Khan gets a cake
the
in.
function of the cake would be the same for them, like showing off wealth, bringing people together, showing like who is deserving of the recognition that the cake provides, and all. And obviously, having someone jump out of it is going to work very well in villain settings, like a lair.
Scantily clad, ideally.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Cake songs. Are there any song? Now I know there's a lot of birthday party songs and things like that. Are there any songs where the set of the song is a giant cake and people are dancing on a giant cake or something? Because I feel that should exist.
The Govinda song that I was talking about, the Govinda where he comes out of a cake, that is very
Ah,
much around the cake.
okay,
There
good.
is the song from Swarg Narak, which is Leena O Leena, that is around a cake. Like the cake opens up and he's walking, and it's got that.
I
Yes.
watched that one at work today because I have not seen that film, but I saw it on your site. And Pitu, so this song seems to fill a bunch of different things. So it's Vinod Mehra, right, is kind of
Oh.
looking at a cake, and then the cake morphs into a structural cake, out of which rises a giant bottle of VAT 69. And then is it Prema Narayan who comes out of the cake and dances and this is in a club. And meanwhile, Shabana Azmi is sitting very sadly at the table by herself, looking glum. So like, I feel like I've never seen this movie, but I feel like I can tell you a lot about what's happening. Is that one
Right.
song? All those are things you see in other films and songs, but I was like, wow, this has everything.
I have a a question about Bobby. It just occurred to me. You know that first opening introductory sequence of Dimple Kapadia where she opens the door and she does this because she has flour in her. What was she baking? Was she baking a cake or was it just boring old bread or rotis
No,
or
it's
something?
actually besan and pakoda. In fact,
Oh, okay.
in fact, Raj Kapoor gave an interview once that he remembered Nargis like that in one of the. So it's taken from that scene in an interview.
Okay.
Wow. See, this is why you have an actual scholar on your podcast, is to talk about citations and things like this.
Because it's like Beth and I are like, we love cake. And then we have Aditi on and we're like, wow, she really loves cake. Like she has dedicated a lot of time to cakes.
I have a listener question for you, Aditi. Someone asked me, will you ask her what is the most lurid cake you have ever seen?
Oh, it must be that cake from that you got me from that movie, the Varun Dhawan movie.
I
What
don't
was that
remember.
Varun Dhawan movie where we have that cake that actually Tumblr took down for being vulgar and lurid?
Oh, that's
a
right.
big-
It's like a scantily clad lady cake,
yeah,
right?
yeah. They
Oh.
took it
That's
down.
right.
Tumblr, I can't put it, but they took it down for vulgarity or something. And
That
I
must
don't
be one of the when he's with Ali Abad. Why can't I remember the name of that film?
Yes. They took it down for bad, like vulgar content. So I can't.
Wow, that would do it. That would do it. Okay, so you've told us we are no longer in peak cake era, which I can live with. Like we still have some, but they're not as common. Is there anyone that you would expect to be in a cake scene who you have not yet seen in a cake scene?
In the new generation, like the new
Anyone really, could be current or past.
Feroz Khan.
Yeah. We want him to have a cake.
Yeah. Ideally one that has a lot of like alcohol in it, like a cake that has like limoncello or amaretto. Like it's got to have some alcohol. It cannot be a cake that people under the age of 18 can eat. And it must be accompanied by champagne or an expensive wine.
He also seems like the kind who might have the cake where a lady jumps out.
For sure. Yes, 100%.
I have a lot more I want to ask now about going from cakes a little more widely to what I'm going to call feasts, like big meals where a lot of people have gathered beyond just a big family dinner or something. Now I know that's not your specialty, but I've just, since you are an actual food historian, I was kind of curious if you had any thoughts about how feasting has been depicted or works in films over the years. Because I tried to think of some examples and I really, I would have to pull out all my screen grabs and really look. I can't come up with many examples, but I think I must just not remember. I'm sure they're there.
So we're thinking of villain kind of feasting. Then we have my favorite is collection of fake meats that looks fake. Like you have meat being roasted on the pit and people dancing around it.
There
and
you
that
go.
looks super fake. So there's one from Andhi Tufan where it looks so fake, but everyone's dancing river. And you can tell that it's plastic. It's got like,
oh, I love it.
It's very plastic. And I have a bunch of those like fake meat favorites where they're celebrating and they have that whole roasting, and that's somehow associated with villains. Often they have forest, they're roasting meat and they're all dancing, and that meat is so fake, you can tell right away.
Do you think there is associated
pet peeve?
Is it associated with villains because you can do there's something violent about meat and like the flame and all that kind of stuff of roasting?
Exactly, that's what I think. Danny is a robber. Yeah, Danny. That doesn't say like he's got this violent thing. It's like Andhi Tufan is like a remake of Sholay anyway.
Yeah.
So he's Gabbar and it's got that whole thing going. And
Nice.
Speaking of Sholay, that song Mehbooba that Helen is so bewitching in, and there's that whole bonfire and everything. Is there like a spit roasting thing in that or no? Because I feel like there should be.
There should be.
I'll have to rewatch.
That it doesn't. I remember when the meat looks super fake. So my memory works in very different ways. I'm like, that meat there is fake, and that's registered in my mind.
This is what I love about all of us who have been talking about Hindi cinema online together so much. And I'm sure people do this not online too, but we all have our weird little niche things that we love to look into. So cake seems like the biggest topic in the world compared to fake meat. I love it. had a friend back in blog days who was very interested in chandeliers in
Wow.
Hindi cinema, of which there are a lot, and which bear some similarity to
Yes.
cakes. We had, I believe there was someone who was, it may have been the same. Nope, it was a different person who loved VAT 69 and wanted to collect screenshots of that. She also loved balloons
Is
in
that
film.
Greta?
No, it was Susie in Minnesota.
Oh, Suzanne. Yeah.
One of Greta's favorites are when you get a bottle and it's got the little miniature dancing people in it.
Yeah.
Those appear more often than you would think. Like once I've said this, you're going to be like, oh yeah, there's one. And the reason, so those of you who can see us on YouTube, the cake in my background is not spectacular. It's just a very standard cake, looks great. But the room it's in is that exceptionally lurid and gaudy house from the 70s that I love so much. That's never a hero house nor a villain house. It's just sort of somewhere in between. It's got this ridiculous wallpaper in it that I love so much. So when I saw that, I was like, oh, that's the cake for me. I have to put that in. I don't know, before we close, Aditi, what do you think is important about how food is used in the movies you've seen and the thousands and thousands of movies you've seen? Like, what would you like to say about food?
Oh, about food. You know, I'm always interested in looking at how when they will say this person is very poor and that last roti that is left and the mother is sacrificing. That's the one thing. But my favorite bits of food is again Manmohan Desai, he who got Sizzler, the movie where prawn and they're eating Sizzler. I think it's Amar Akbar Anthony, where they're eating Sizzlers. And I think those things stay a lot in my mind. So I remember moments more than an overall culture.
Mm-hmm.
I remember moments. To me, interesting is how a lot of those and that's something you see playing out politically, is how vegetarians are seen to be like nicer and like better, like the good people, the vegetarians, or and this whole thing, they eat meat, that sort of a thing. But again, a nice film like Ram or Sham, where Dilip Kumar is eating chicken happily, way to going. I find those dynamics interesting, where the space it's coming from or where it's going. And
Yeah.
I find 70s films tend to be more liberal in terms of food, whereas it gets bad around the 80s. They're more like holier than thou about food. And then it keeps shifting, this whole idea.
Have you noticed, I mean, another huge topic would be what kinds of cuisines are being depicted, and I assume with in 90s and economic liberalization and stuff, you're going to get this influx, not just of characters going to McDonald's or whatever, but even other kinds of food that are being prepared at home. And I can't tell you what film it is, but I've definitely seen recent Hindi films where someone is like making a lasagna at home, and I was like, oh, that just kind of pinged for me, because I felt like usually the cooking scenes I've noticed have been traditionally Indian foods, and now you've got this other stuff happening, because of course you do, because we all live in the world that is 2023. Like, of course that's going to happen.
Wasn't it Chef, Beth, where we commented on how
yes,
Saif Ali Khan
probably
kept making pasta? Like every time
That's
he was
right.
cooking something for himself, it
That's
was
right.
pasta.
Yeah. Have you seen that movie, Aditi, Chef?
I have. The opposite is true for Mujhse Dosti Karoge, where the Italian chef is making gobi ka paratha. I find that when the Italian chef is making
right.
gobi ka paratha.
That's right.
I love that movie.
That's
It's
right.
like pleasure.
Pitu, do you have any thoughts on food and Hindi films before we close?
Yes, I have two thoughts.
Tell me.
One, that scene in Queen where Kangana Ranaut is eating the pasta, I think it's pen or something. She's eating the pasta, and then the chef actually starts chatting with her, and she starts complaining about how isme namak thoda kam hai, garlic zyada, mirchi thodi dalni chahiye thi. And he's like just like letting her speak, and he's being sarcastic, and she completely misses the sarcasm. And he's like, oh, is there anything else I should add? And then she's like, a little bit of masala would be fine. And that made me laugh out so loud, because this is such a desi thing to do. Like, we will get, like, I do this too. Like, Indian. And I do this where I'll go to an Italian restaurant and I'm like, oh, this ravioli is so great, or the tortellini is so great. And once the waiter's back is turned, I will immediately get like some of the hot pepper flakes, and I'll immediately like pour them all over my food. And I'll have like, my American friends who are just like, are you okay? But I love when in Hindi films they depict like how Indians love to Indianize international cuisines. So we'll take like Chinese food and then Indo-Chinese as like an entire thing, where I have friends who are ethnically Chinese, and if they were to eat gobi Manchurian, they'd be like, what in heaven's name is this? But that's what Indian people do. I recently also saw someone had posted on Instagram, it's like some food blogger. It was a pasta ki sabzi. And I was just like, are you okay? Like, even I wouldn't go that far. So as an Indian person, I enjoy those moments because they make me laugh, and I can laugh at myself. And the fact that Indian people have to take Western cuisine or Asian cuisine or whatever, and we have to put our little spin on it. I kind of enjoy that personally. And my favorite food memory associated with cinema is when back in Chicago, I had gone with a few friends, like 3 other couples, to watch The Dirty Picture in the theater. And again, another Indian specialty is that we don't pay attention to like the certification of a film. So The Dirty Picture 7 p.m. show had a lot of children in it, which it shouldn't have had, but there were a lot of small kids. And in our row, there were like I think 8 of us. And at the end of it, there was a young couple with like a really small child. And I remember looking at the kid and going, why is this kid in the Dirty Picture? And there's a scene in the movie which has cake, where Vidya Balan is, she has this cake, and then she's very sensually, it's like a seductive scene. So she takes the cream off of the cake and she's like, feeding it, and like the music is sexy, and she's wearing like lingerie and all of this. And everyone is watching the scene, and this little kid in our row like piped up and he said, Mummy, uncle ka happy birthday hai? And the entire theater was howling. It was so funny. He literally thought it is uncle's happy birthday. It is like one of my favorite memories of going to the cinema. It was uncle's happy birthday. Yes.
I got water down my throat the wrong way. I'm laughing at that. All right, to end, Aditi and then Pitu and then I. What is your favorite birthday cake for yourself?
Oh, I could go on and on. Aditi, go first.
You mean the flavor or like
Anything.
Oh, my favorite birthday cake flavor is actually caramel, salted caramel, and
Yes.
that's my favorite.
Yes.
What do you like on the top of it? Do you have any decorative
Buttercream
requirements?
frosting, always buttercream frosting. That's my go-to frosting. I like the sweet American buttercream frosting, not the whole Italian. I like the American one.
And can you get that where you currently live? Is there a good source for that cake?
Yeah.
And Aditi is quite a cook as well, since we have gotten to hang out together in person extensively. I know this about her, but and baker as well, from what I've seen of pictures, because it was summertime when we hung out, so we did not bake a whole lot because it was too hot. But yum. Okay,
Nice.
Pitu, what's your birthday cake, since your birthday is about to happen?
Two cakes.
Ooh,
so
two
when
cakes.
I lived in New York, there's a bakery called Baked NYC, and they're in Brooklyn, and I think they also had like a Manhattan location. They have a salted caramel cake with like ganache. Oh, it is the most delicious thing on the planet. And when I lived in New York, I always got that for my birthday. Now I live in California, and the cake that I love here, and that I have already placed an order for my birthday, which is coming up. So my birthday is between Jesus' birthday and New Year's. And that cake is the chocolate entremont, and you get it at Mademoiselle Colette. So they have they have a location in Palo Alto and one in Redwood City, and they have a chocolate entremont. Oh, it is the most beautiful thing in the world. It's like it has a mirror glaze, and it's just dark chocolate, and it has like mousse inside, and it just gives me so much happiness. I will be eating a gigantic chunk of it for my birthday breakfast.
Nice.
So yes.
Cake for
what
breakfast
about you,
is
Beth?
delicious. I mean, cake for breakfast is basically a muffin with frosting. So what's the problem? Problem, hey.
Do you think
What's
if
yours?
someone said If
Mhm.
someone said they don't like cake, do you think that that person is potentially like a serial killer and we should avoid them? Because I feel like that person is suspect, but I don't know if I'm being judgmental. But your expression is telling me otherwise.
I mean, Aditi, what do you think?
Hey, even villains in Hindi film like cakes. So I don't know where to go with
Exactly.
this.
If you
But I'm
don't
so
like
curious.
cake,
What's Beth's favorite cake?
Oh, so okay,
Curious.
so my cake, any chocolate cake is gonna be like, that's probably what I would choose. However, we I mentioned briefly that my mom made cakes from the mix when I was growing up, which I still love. And there's one that I used to have all the time that is kind of harder to find now, though you can. It's cherry chip.
mm,
And it's a very pink cake, very artificial, and it's got little dark pink nuggets of fake cherry flavor or whatever. And I don't remember if it's Betty Crocker or Duncan Hines or whatever. It's one of those big names that you can get easily in North America. And I've seen strawberry chip recently. That's not the same thing. It's cherry chip, and it's just tooth rottingly sweet. It's so
oh,
sweet, but I love it. And my mom would bake it in the big flat pan, and then she would write, happy birthday, Beth, on it. And I just love it so much. So that's my birthday cake. Although any cake is welcome. I have no, even a not that great cake is typically worth eating, in my opinion. I am not a big fan of the like grocery store frosting. That's usually a little too sweet for me, but I
mm.
mean, I'm not going to be that picky about it. Cake is cake and it's all good.
Yeah, cake is
So
cake, right?
So public service announcement. I also, like you, I'm not a big fan of the grocery store cakes because again, they're mind-numbingly sweet.
Mhm.
But if y'all live near a Trader Joe's, you have to go to Trader Joe's. They have something called the dark chocolate ganache chocolate cake, and it's a sheet cake, but it's this like it's a small package, and it's so good. It is amazing. It also
Mm.
comes in like a white version, like a cream sort of version, but I've never bought that. I'm more of a chocolate fiend. It is so good. And after you've had a long day at work, the best thing in the world is just to make yourself some tea, get the Trader Joe's dark chocolate ganache sheet cake out of the fridge. They call it the mini sheet cake, yes. And then just to eat like oh, it's so good. It's good room temperature. It's good
I
cold.
love a
It's just,
sheet cake and then like a mini. So you're like,
but
it's a
it's
mini
mini.
huge cake. No complaints
Nobody
though.
is here in Canada, so yeah.
Oh, there aren't? Oh, no. Okay,
What? I
sorry.
mean, there's got to be great. I mean, I know there's great Canadian sweets for sure. I actually
Oh,
just
true.
saw a video yesterday for a thing I'd never heard of, which was a Quebec, like a maple cream cake where you put
I
the
love that.
and then it
Love.
inverts when you bake it. It sounds, I mean, it's like a
Oh,
cup of cream and a cup of maple syrup. What could go wrong? It's delicious.
I
wow.
love that cake. That's a very good.
What are what are some other non-cake sweets that we did? Like, yes, I know that for a birthday we have to have cake, but if you had to pick a
Mhm.
non-cake dessert for your birthday, what would you have? Like, what would be your second choice after cake?
I I'll go with
Hi.
Pie? Any
Mhm.
specific kind?
pecan.
Ah,
Ooh,
yes,
very nice.
yes. So when I went to Dallas to visit my friends, because that's the only reason I would go to Dallas, they took me to a place where we had like it was pecan pie, but it had bourbon in it. And I
Hmm.
was like, yes, we'd gone for a long hike. And I was like, I deserve a treat, you guys. And then they took me to this place and it had bourbon pecan pie. And I was like, yes, Texas, you have redeemed yourself for me today. So, yes, I would recommend that. What about you,
Nice.
Beth?
Uh, Ice cream. Now,
Mm.
I do not require cake to have ice cream on it. That's good. I don't, but those are, but ice cream, I often jokingly refer to ice cream as nature's perfect food. uh, and kulfi, gelato, like all the different kinds are all very delicious to me. I will eat it in any season, any weather. I don't care. Like if you have to put on a blanket so it's warm enough to eat ice cream, then you do the needful, and that's what you do. But yeah, ice cream is really
Any
those
specific
two are my
flavor
favorite.
you love?
I love coconut ice cream, which is not that easy to find
Oh.
typically, although if you have like a Mexican ice cream shop near you, that'll have it sometimes. Obviously, I've had some coconut ice cream from India. I believe Thailand
Mm.
does a coconut ice cream, but
Mm.
I love peppermint ice cream that you can get this time of
Yeah.
year, at least in the US. I love lemon, but like typically I like my ice cream to have a lot of stuff in it. So like nuts,
Mm.
ripples, crunches, swirls, little candies. I like a
Like
textural ice
the
cream.
mousse crunch, whatever
A
ice cream. I
mousse
love that
track,
one.
a
That's so
peanut butter
good.
ripple, little bits of peppermint candy, the coconut flakes, like, yeah, but I mean, again, even bad ice cream is really typically worth eating in my so yeah, I'm easy to please. What was yours, Pitu, and in addition to your French cakes?
Dark chocolate brownies. I like dark
Ah.
chocolate brownies, and I make them at home, and I put walnuts in them. I mean, I like store-bought brownies also, but they typically don't have walnuts, which is why I make them at home. But dark chocolate brownies, especially if you eat them with like a scoop of vanilla ice cream.
Yeah, that's
So good.
delicious.
Yeah.
Well, now that we've made everyone exceptionally hungry,
Yes.
get yourself some dessert. Celebrate whatever wintertime or Northern Hemisphere wintertime holidays of light and family and the people you love being near you are relevant for you. We hope you enjoy them very much. Thank you for celebrating with us, and long live the king and queen of cakes.
Yay.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.